Um, Lisa Gelfie, a 58-year-old registered Republican in Arizona, had made the mistake and voted for Donald Trump as for squatter 2 years ago. But she had grown tired of this election fraud claim bullshit. It's the main reason why she voted for Democrats this year for the governor, senator, secretary of state, and attorney general this fall, and she plans to change her registration to independent. Not allowing the election to be settled is very divisive. It's This is what Gelfie had said. She's a semi-retired attorney from Paradise Valley. She says, "I think the election speaks for itself." She said she had voted for Republican. She said she had voted for Republicans in the down ballot who weren't as vocal about election fraud or as closely tied to Trump but she couldn't support Arizona's four major Republican candidates because they echoed Trump's false claims. Republicans had succeeded in one of their top goals this year. They brought more of their party's voters to the polls than the Democrats. But in the course of energizing their core voters, Republicans in many states lost voters in the political center, basically independent, and many Republicans who were uneasy with elements of the party's focus under Donald Trump. Control of the House and Senate, which had seemed poised to land with the Republican Party, is coming down to a handful of races that are so far so close to call. Though the GOP remains on track to winning a narrow majority in the House, Republicans have won nearly 5.5 more million votes in House races than Democrats, which is a tally by the nonpartisan Cook political report finds. Many voters were motivated by anxiety over high inflation and a low opinion of President Biden's responses to the inflation, which Biden can't control the inflation. At the same time, the Republican analysts had said that they're unexpectedly weak, showing that the election indicated that they had failed to press hard enough on those issues. In Michigan, the Republican Party's state committee said a failure to talk to voters in the political center was a central reason that Tudor Dixon, the party's Trump-endorsed nominee for governor, was crushed in a 10-point percentage defeat by Democratic Governor Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Now, Tudor's efforts focused largely on Republican red meat issues, in hopes of inspiring a 2020-like showing at the polls, which is a memo from the GOP committee, had said. And there were more ads on transgender sports than inflation, gas prices, and bread and butter issues that could have swayed independent voters. More than 30% of the midterm voter poll by one measure were independent voters, or people who didn't affiliate with any political party. David Winston, who's a Republican pollster who consults with the party's House and Senate leadership, said the polling showed that they were unhappy with the country's direction, and that they assigned blame for the high inflation to Biden, which Biden has nothing to do with. So the door was open for Republicans to have a good interaction. And this is what Mr. Winston has said. Everyone was focused on the turnout of their base, and they missed almost a third of the electorate, and basically the third of the electorate that's in play. Now, Mike Cernovich, a conservative blogger and supporter and a big nutlicker of Trump, said in an online analysis of the election outcome, he said, "I would say the single biggest issue was if you focused in 2022 and was the 2020 election, then you were going to have a bad night with independents." Now, nationally, Republican candidates this year had the advantage of a favorable voter mix. 49% of the midterm voters were Republicans and 43% were Democrats, a 6-point advantage of the AP vote cast, a large survey of the midterm electorate found. But the GOP edge was similar or larger in states with competitive Senate races. 5 points in Pennsylvania, 8 points in Georgia, and 11 points in Arizona. And despite these advantages, the Republicans lost the Senate races in Pennsylvania and Arizona, and they will compete again in Georgia when the race goes to a runoff next month. Now, undercutting the GOP advantage was that independents favored Democrats by 4 points nationally. This is what the survey had found, and by far, it's a more substantial 18 points in Pennsylvania, and a more substantial 28 points in Georgia, and more than substantial 30 points in Arizona. Now, polling shows that the independent voters have had less enthusiasm for either party. Both parties were viewed favorably by less than 30% of the independents, and unfavorably by 50% or more. "It's picking the lesser of the two evils," said Mickey LaPlace, who's 65 years old, and Mickey is a retired as a retired respiratory therapist near Port Huron, Michigan, and he backed Gretchen Whitmer for governor. Or actually woman, okay. She said, okay, so Mickey's an actual woman, not a guy, okay. Basically, Mickey voted for Gretchen Whitmer because she didn't want Tudor Dixon to be the governor, and she opposed Dixon, and she opposed Ms. Dixon, and she said because of her viewpoint on abortion, but also she's a Trump supporter and election denier, so she's a no on so many levels. So Dixon opposed abortion, even in cases of rape and incest. For many voters, a support for legalized abortion changed the election from a referendum on Democratic control of Washington into more of a choice between the two parties. James Van Steele, who's 29, is an independent voter and a transportation planner in the Detroit suburb of Ferndale, and he said he would have considered a Republican candidate for governor in the mold of Senator Mitt Romney of Utah, but he doesn't agree with Romney's restrictive view of abortion rights. But he sees the senator as a moderating force in government, and he's open open to working with both parties in Michigan. However, the primary season only drew more ideology-driven Republicans, he said, eventually yielding Dixon as the nominee. Now, Dixon's position on abortion was a non-starter with him. They had talked about some kind of middle ground for regulation, but keeping abortion legal in our state. I might have considered her more openly, but that was a very hard line that she took, he said. And now Jennifer Barzone, 52, is a stay-at-home mother in Phoenix. She made the mistake in voting for Trump in 2016, and she says that she cannot remember who she voted for in 2020. Well, it had to be Trump or Biden, so I'm going to assume that she probably voted for Trump again. So she said she supported Democrats this year for every office because of their support of the access to abortion. I don't think the government should tell women what to do with their bodies, she said, adding that her votes were solely decided on this issue. Now, Republicans had won in high-profile races, and they were sometimes helped by a favorable voter mix in the electorate. In North Carolina, Republicans outnumbered Democrats by 7 percentage points in the midterm voter poll, and the victorious GOP Representative Ted Budd limited his loss among independents to 9 points, which is a narrow defeat, which is a narrow deficit for many other of the GOP Senate candidates. The election results revive a debate that runs through many election campaigns about whether to drive a voter turnout among a party's core supporters, which often means promoting the most ideologically sharp policy ideas, or whether the better course is to try to persuade voters in the political center. Now, motivating your base makes sense, but you also have to make sure your party doesn't nominate people who are so flawed that your base can't accept them. This is what Fred Yang, a Democratic pollster, had said. He said that this is the case in places such as Arizona, and it accounts for why GOP Senate nominee Blake Masters, who aligned himself with Trump's false claims of election fraud, said he would support national abortion restrictions. Not only did he not only lost independent voters by more than 30 points, but he also forfeited 14% of Republicans to his rival, the Democratic Senator Mark Kelly, who won. Now, by contrast, only 2% of Democrats had backed Masters. Just as I have repeated so many times in my prior videos, there was no fraud in the 2020 there was no widespread fraud in the 2020 election, there was no fraud at all, and there was not enough to change the result, federal officials had said, and dozens of lawsuits filed by Trump sycophants challenged the results had failed because they had no evidence. In Pennsylvania, some Republicans worried that their nominee for governor, State Senator Doug Mastriano, who would alienate centrist and independent voters with his no-exceptions position on abortion and his role as a leading promoter of Trump's unfounded election conspiracy claims, and they feared that Mastriano, who lost his election by 14 percentage points, would also push those voters away from backing the party's Senate candidate Mehmet Oz, who also lost. Dr. Mehmet Oz also had lost independent voters by 19 points, and some 8% of Republicans backed his vicious opponent, John Fetterman, which is more than the share of Democrats who supported his campaign. Goodness fucking gracious, that's a state that they should have won, said Yang, referring to the greater number of Republicans and Democrats who voted. Independent voters have been an essential ingredient in both parties. Successful campaigns to win control of the House Republicans carried independents by 14 points in 1994 and by 19 points in 2010. But when they claimed the speaker's gavel, Mr. Winston said Democrats won independents by 18 points in 2006 and 12 points in 2018, and those were the years when they reclaimed control of the House. Now, this poll was conducted of more than 94,000 midterm voters who had voted this year, and was also conducted by the NORC at the University of Chicago for the Wall Street Journal and the Associated Press Info. But if you like the video, you can get the video, like, and subscribe to my channel, RBW King. You can also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out. If you want to support my work even further, you can donate to my Patreon link, which you can find in the About section of YouTube, and for just a little over $3 a month, your donation can help go a long way, and thanks for listening.